How's it going? I am here today with my friend Steve Bremner, and we're going to be talking all about what it looks like to publish your own books. This is Branding 110, and we're going live right now.
I didn't expect it to come on.
Hello there, everybody. I am Ryan Rhoades, and today I am here with my friend Steve Bremner. I am the founder and creative director at reformdesigns.biz. We run a full-service creative agency, and we are today talking all about publishing your own books. Steve has written a number of books, and he also helps other authors create their own books, and he and I have been talking about putting together some packages for new authors on what it could look like for you to bring your own ideas to life in a book. And some of those things are what we're going to be talking about today. So, Steve, how about you just introduce yourself, talk a little bit about who you are, what you do, and why you started in the first place.
Yeah. So like Ryan said, my name is Steve, and I've been blogging for like 11 or 12 years, or no more than that, maybe. I've been podcasting. I've been on social media since whenever I find out a new one exists. So, and then with books in particular, I got into doing Kindle books, I think the end of 2012, and published my first one the beginning of 2013. And that's the nutshell. But for a long time, I've been involved in some kind of content creation. You know, I've always enjoyed writing something. I've always, when I discovered podcasting, I enjoyed communicating and expressing myself in that way, just as a natural outflow of writing, and, the ways you can communicate and express your idea, in a different capacity than just the written word. And then, so it just seemed like a natural evolution that, with the explosion of self-publishing, that it's worth venturing down that road as well. And the way it led into helping other people do that with their books was just paying attention to the kinds of things, the kinds of favors people kept asking of me. Other people self-publishing, other people writing something, or, needing help with formatting or whatever, and coming to me and asking for my help with it. So it took me a while to realize I could make like a business out of this and charge for all this help I'm otherwise giving away for free.
Right. That's
so,
pretty typical.
So those are a few of the streams, flowing together to answer that question.
Okay, very cool. So you started basically just doing your own thing, and eventually people started saying, "Hey, I like what you're doing. Can you help me do similar things to what you're doing?" Right?
Yeah. I mean, I've always been passionate about writing.
Mm-hmm.
So that's just natural. And you know how I know you read Robert Greene, mm-hmm. and he talks about that zone of genius, where you've gone down your your apprenticeship, so to speak, and these different things where you've become an expert at something, tens of thousands of hours of practice, that you told me you could just do a book cover in your sleep. You're just so accustomed to doing it. And I felt the same way with writing, or, and coupled with being able to type fast, it started to become just a natural second nature thing to me. And then whenever I discovered blogging, my first blog was just a simple Google, Blogspot.
I remember Blogspot.
Yeah. And this is when, if you wanted to have links on the sidebar, you had to make them yourself,
Yep.
You had to know your HTML and whatever. So that's how long ago this was. So, I would be sharing things in it, documenting what I was doing in school, for people, back home reading it. And it became a daily habit, to constantly be putting something public on the internet, not necessarily with a large sphere of influence, but the practice or the lifestyle habit of expressing myself in writing in a public way, right? Before Facebook, before MySpace, really. And
before it was all centralized into a handful of watering holes, we were blazing trails, Steve.
Yeah. So I don't want to get ahead of myself, because I think you've got another question about that later. But basically, I was doing my own thing out of just being passionate about it in the first place, without ever having thought of how to monetize it or how to help other people do it. But like when you you've probably learned this in your case, when you're doing something before everyone else is necessarily, then you become the go-to person that people want to get advice from, get the opinion of. Hey, Steve, I know you've done many books. I don't know how to format my book into Kindle.
Right.
Can you do it for me? And I never even thought of charging until like I had somebody say, I'll pay you X if you'll do this for me. It's like, sure. The answer is yes.
Yes.
It's like, and it's like, not that you're saying yes to the person, but they're removing like a ceiling I never knew I had.
Right.
Like a mental barrier that, I have skills I could be charging for, if people want my
Right.
help.
Well, and for those of you, for those who don't know, Steve actually you're in Peru, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, so Steve's in Peru, and he's working with customers all over the world. And his story is very similar to ours. Whenever we started our design agency, I was doing my own blogging. I was doing my own content and creating, I was writing a lot, and same kind of thing. It's like I had a small handful of readers, but I really just focused on essentially writing content for the people who are already listening. Kevin Kelly, the founder of Wired Magazine, has an excellent article and theory on all of this called 1,000 True Fans. I've talked about it before, but for those of you who haven't looked into it, just Google 1,000 True Fans. Dan Hirsch has joined, and he said Steve needs a desk like Ryan's. Thanks for watching, Dan. Yeah, I'm always working on improving this scene. Like I can just kind of snap my fingers and make this microphone go away. Watch, just like that. So it's the magic.
I can't do that with my microphone.
Yeah, he can't do that with mine. With his, this is actually not a real microphone. It's not really a cartoon. My actual microphone's right here. For those of you who haven't figured it out, we're not actually sitting in a cartoon. I'm in a green screen studio right now. But
Right.
yeah, I mean, what it really boils down to, guys, is, when you're creating content, focus on creating content that is reaching the people who are already listening, instead of trying to go viral or trying to go big or whatever. It's like there's too much pressure in that, and it's too unpredictable, and it's not really sustainable. But whenever you have people who, like with Steve, you have people who are coming to you who see what you're already doing. They already place a value on what you're doing. They already see you as an expert in that field. And so that's when you're in a position where you can actually start monetizing what you're doing. And so Steve, you started helping other people with their books. And I think you told me just relatively recently, you started working on a project with an author in, is it Australia?
Yes.
Yeah. So talk a little bit about that and what it's like. You're in Peru. I'm in Salem, Oregon, in the U.S. right now, and you're working with an author in Australia. So like these are things that a lot of people it's like they can't wrap their head around whenever they're in their cubicle and just kind of doing the 9 to 5 thing. And so talk a little bit about what it's been like for you to work with people all over the world and the impact that has had on your worldview.
Yeah. To be honest with you, I kind of forgot about that until you phrased it that way in a question, because like I said, like you said, sorry, mm-hmm. I've been in Peru for over 9 years, and before that I lived a couple years in the Netherlands, and so I've already been accustomed to the idea of Skype being this thing I use to talk to people in other countries because I'm not in the same country, and this podcast I was doing, I started when I was in the Netherlands. And me and this other guy who lived in a different city, we would record ourselves having these Bible theology conversations so that different disciples of ours all over the country could listen to it, even if they couldn't come to one of our houses or our events or something.
Sure.
And then I'd find out people I knew in Canada or in North America or whatever were also listening to it, or they'd also discovered it, or I'd, made people aware of it and they were also checking it out, or people I'd never met before had discovered me from it. And so this is like 10 years ago, right?
Right.
When Facebook would kind of still have been new.
Well, whenever you could post something on Facebook and like 75 to 80% of your friends would actually see it, instead of less than half of 1% who sees it now unless you pay them.
when you had to see like your friend so-and-so joined this group, like you'd see everything whether you wanted to or not.
Right.
Yeah. In those days. And as the years went on and, I got more prolific as far as the website and writing, and then books, and having higher caliber, more profile guests to interview, it didn't really register like as being weird or some kind of wow, the future is now kind of
Right.
thing, because I've been so used to that being a part of my lifestyle, being away from home or away from everybody else and stuff. So, like I've got a client in California, I've got a client in Australia, and another guy in New England that I've just started to work with. And okay, Skype or Zoom or whatever, if they have a preference, is how we communicate. And I'm already accustomed to like interviewing and listening and paying attention to people from doing a podcast. So those things just kind of flow naturally for me if I'm gonna hear what an author or a potential author wants to write about or wants to do with their book. It's like I'm already tuned in to trying to listen to them
Sure.
and help take them where they want to go. So the idea of it being just over the internet, no matter where we are in the world, is like, yeah, the world's a small place. That's nothing new to me, anymore.
Right. And it's one of those things too, where it opens up so many different possibilities, and the benefits of the benefits for me of creating a blog and putting my own original content out there over the years. I mean, I'm like you, I've been doing this for a really long time, and things are always in development. I'm always kind of thinking like, okay, what's this going to look like 5 years from now? What's this going to look like 6 to 12 months from now? And how can I make my actions today be in that direction? And so the benefits of doing that, though, it's like the fact that I'm able to have this conversation with you right now, and you're able to bring a perspective to my life and to my business and my worldview from your experiences in Peru, your experiences working with people from around the world, and not just like my immediate local community. It's been the value of that has been immeasurable for me. I mean, I have there's people watching right now that
like Dan in Hungary.
Yeah. It's like Dan in Hungary. My friend Brent, who I met through one of my old blogs a number of years ago, and he now lives just down the road from me, and he has been an immense help and just a great friend over the years in helping me with my business. And we actually published a book together. We created a zombie coloring book because he loves
I saw that on
drawing.
his Facebook.
He loves drawing like zombies and fun monster things and whatever. And so we're like, hey, we know how to publish books. Like I published my first book in 2014. It's called Stop Wasting Time and Burning Money. And so I was like, hey, it's really kind of simple. Like once you nail down the technical aspects of how to do it and actually put in the work and write the book and create the content, it's relatively simple to create the books nowadays. So we're like, what would it look like for us to just make this thing and see what happens? And so Brent has actually posted the link to the book in the comments, so if you're interested, you can pick that up just in time for Halloween. And so it's one of those things where I tell people all the time, there's so much opportunity. There's so many things that you can do nowadays that just 5-10 years ago was completely impossible. And a lot of it, you can do it from your phone. Like a lot of my books, I've written a significant portion of the content on my phone in various different apps. And so, for you, I guess, my first major question is, what made you really decide to start writing and publishing your own books in the first place? Because I'm always interested in those kind of origin stories.
Yeah. Well, I guess the same kind of motivation for blogging in the first place, feeling like, okay, I have some things I can write, I have some things to say, and it's very evident, Kindle books are kind of like a new realm or a new standard that you can communicate in, you can get your message across in.
Right.
And other than that kind of mental barrier that, okay, well, people have to pay money if they're going to read this on Kindle, but otherwise the same idea. And I had been ghostwriting, I had been providing content for an entrepreneur who I was basically his ghostwriter for a year. And I'd been stretched and learned a lot about writing topics that were not my expertise, right?
Sure.
And so one night we're chatting or whatever on Skype, and he gives me a link to some kind of webinar that's about building a Kindle empire or something like that. Um, it was the first time I'd ever heard
Sure.
of that, but like it's all over the place now. So it's not. It was new to me then, and I watched it, and there was this guy who was going on about how he had like 30 something books and he makes like 5 figures a month in the sales. And he was explaining these kind of black hat ways. He just goes on Craigslist and finds somebody to make a report for him. And then he, makes a $2.99 book and gets, somebody to do a cover, and he puts it on Amazon and sells it. And so he's done that like 30 times, and he's
Wow.
got this residual income going on.
Sure.
And I remember watching that going, if this business guy who's not a real author can do that, then like, why can't I when I am an author? Like,
Right.
I actually am an author, like what's stopping me, or why don't I give it a shot? And so like, that's what I did. I started off with a 20,000 word book that I sold for like $2.99 at first. And so it's like about half the length of your typical nonfiction Christian book or whatever.
Sure.
And so I just kept priming the pump and practicing and trying with short books like that for about a year. It's like the first year, every 2 or 3 months, I'd put out a new short book, and got a lot of positive feedback. I had a lot of encouragement from people. And then so basically why I started doing it was that sense of like, yeah, it seems like it's the next thing I'm supposed to do. If I am writing and I am an author and I am, I've spent years posting content publicly for free on a website.
Right.
It felt like it's just the next natural evolution as a writer or in the writing journey to continue, and do it on Kindle, do it on Amazon, do it on, the paperback systems like CreateSpace.
Sure.
Or,
Which now is going to be switching to Kindle Direct Publishing.
Yeah. So that's how it was for me. What about you? Am
So
I allowed
for
to ask you
me-
questions too?
Yeah, absolutely. So for me, it was a lot of similar kind of things. So like I started my business officially in 2011. But I had been freelancing since I was a kid. I started out doing freelance design work in my aunt's print shop whenever I was like 13 or 14. And so it was right around the time that computers had like started showing up in people's houses and those kind of things. And I was so fascinated by how somebody would like take something from a screen, and then she would send it to the printer in the basement. And it was funny because like they at that time they had some of those like really old school giant ink printers. And so have you seen the movie A Christmas Story? It's kind of like the classic
Yeah,
one.
but it's been a long time.
Right. Well, so the whole like you'll shoot your eye out thing, right?
Uh-huh.
So that scene in that movie where like the old man's in the basement and you see all this like smoke kind of like popping out of the thing. He comes up, he's all dirty and whatever. So like my aunt would do a lot of the design work on the computer, send the files to the printers in the basement, and then you'd hear all this noise in the basement, and my uncle would come up, he'd be covered in ink and like it was all hot and sweaty and has like these big stacks of like brochures and stuff. And I was so fascinated. I was like, this is like magic. Like they're taking something from a two-dimensional surface, and then through some sort of technological wizardry, like you can then hold this object. So I was so captivated by that it really impacted me as a kid. And that's why I started my business in the first place, because I knew that if I could help business owners, like if I could package and sell that feeling, that I would have a sustainable business. And so for me, publishing and writing books really kind of was an outflow of that, because I was doing a lot of blogging, basically been blogging about the process of creating a startup since I started it, and talking about just all the stuff that goes into building a business, the things that I've learned along the way, because I didn't go to business school. I've just kind of, like a lot of people, just kind of bootstrapping stuff. And And so after years of blogging, I started having people are like, why don't you take some of this content and like repurpose it and put it into a book? And so I started doing that, and that's how I came up with my first book. And me and my co-author kind of collaborated on this. I did the cover, and I put us on the back, and we're talking about branding in this whole series I've been doing. This basically became like a really nice way to kind of rubber stamp like something else that's tangible with my logo on it, because I ended up doing the majority of the setup for the book and the publishing aspect of it and whatever. And so after I went through that process, I just kind of got to a point where I was like, wow, you know what? This is really something that it's like I can do this from my office. Like I don't have to have like the giant inkjet printers like you used to just 15, 20 years ago. Like
Right.
You can work with Amazon or any of these other various self-publishing platforms nowadays. And if you have a message, if you have a story to tell, like the only overhead cost, unless you're like, if you're hiring somebody to help you with it or, to do the cover or something, which you can hire us if you're interested, just let us know. The only overhead cost is the time to actually write it. And then after you've, created it, then you have to market it and sell it. But I really just got to a point where I was like, I had enough people asking me the same kind of questions over and over, where it was like, you know what, it'd be just easier if you just read this book. If you don't want to hire us for consulting, maybe you feel like it's too expensive, or you're not ready to make that kind of commitment to hire a coach or something for your business or your organization. Like, read this book, do what it says, and you should be able to get similar results, because a lot of it is very systematic. And so that's kind of how it was for me. And then especially after doing a lot of cover designs for other publishing houses and stuff like that over the years, I've worked with a number of big name publishers to design book covers for some of their authors and stuff. I basically created all of these templates in Photoshop for creating book covers, so that I'm able to essentially just create them very, very quickly. And especially once I had all this writing material that I was able to compile, I was like, well, I can now make the book cover for my books before I even finish writing them. So then that's usually what I do, is I'll design the cover first and then print it out and like kind of hang it up in my office as a reminder, like, hey, this is a book waiting to happen. Because then, like you said, once it's done, it's just residual income. Once you have it up, then that's a legacy that you can, pass down to your family. And that's something that'll perpetually make you money while you're sleeping, as opposed to constantly exchanging your time for money. So that's probably it for me in a nutshell. So.
Yeah. So a lot of parallel, a lot of similarity. Another thing you said about like, how fascinating it was to you to create that experience, that you were thinking of, so others could have it too through your work.
Right.
I mean, the same thing with writing, the same thing for me with podcasting, even, to hop on a recording with somebody, talk about something, and then have like up to like 1,000 people who are going to listen to it.
Right.
Each at their various places in life, their locations in the world, worldview and opinion and wherever they're at. And it's like, that's a lot of people to, listen to and give a crap about something I say.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like that I say, this is what I think and how it works, and discuss it with someone. And so, just that hopping on a call and recording it, and, in a way that it's public, you're talking in a way that's can be listened in on, not like a private recorded call or something. And that becomes some kind of work, becomes some kind of, I don't want to say like a work of art or something, but like it becomes some,
I mean, it can be. I mean, there's some people who take that aspect of it more seriously than others, but for sure.
Yeah. And so to take that and then, to do the same in the written form, where I'm, I've done the same thing as you were mentioning, where you could just say to somebody, here, why don't you read this book about these different things you're asking me questions about? Because, all my books are Christian nonfiction so far. Mm-hmm. I've got 7 drafts on the go, and, some of them are more related to writing and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. And one of them, I just basically ripped off Guy Kawasaki, or however you pronounce his name, mm-hmm. where he says in his 8th book, he took the outline for that book and made a Google Drive document and then just shared it with everyone and got their opinion, right?
Right.
And I'm getting a little ahead of myself because one of your questions was about that. But anyway, and so I did the same thing. It's like, about with regard to finding out like what people want to read or what people want to learn and stuff like that. Well, putting that out there, finding out what an audience out there wants by talking to that audience and, making my own outline, making my own points and finding out what ones people react to the most. And people oftentimes, gave me ideas I'd never thought of before and angles to, take. And so I felt like, okay, that made the book even stronger. And so same thing,
just really connecting deeper with your potential audience and finding out, okay, how can I create something that's really going to serve these people where they're at?
Yeah. And, or looking at podcast episodes that hit a nerve and a lot of people listen to, or blog posts on my own website where, there were some topics where, I check the statistics and see which ones were getting the most traffic from Google, what were the search terms people were using that led them to articles of mine.
Right.
And that would be how I discovered some blog posts could be adapted into their own chapters and put into this book and stuff. And so there's that kind of give and take where you're putting stuff out there and seeing what works, seeing what people react to, seeing what people share on social media, what people contact you about or tell you, hey Ryan, I like that video you did on YouTube.
Right.
I liked that mullet, that wig you were wearing.
We've known each other long enough that you even know what. You even know to bring that up. A lot of people.
Yeah.
Don't.
It's
it past just life becomes, for me, friends.
It becomes a perfect storm of different things that are at play. But you get the idea, right? So you're putting things out there, and you find out some people just nothing clicks, and then if something else, it's your most popular thing,
right?
And so those things can help you figure out like what's worth putting into a book. What's gonna resonate with people on Amazon if it's resonating with people for free on a website on Google or
for sure,
or that people find through Google.
Brent said,
anyway, I'm kind of getting ahead of myself.
I prefer you not.
Do what?
Brent said I could provide photos. I said I prefer you not at this point. Very cool. Okay, so I think that would be a good way to segue into the next question that I had here. How would you advise someone who thinks that they have a message to share that might be worthy of a book, but either is hesitant or isn't sure where to get started?
Yeah, I would ask them the same question that Don Norai Sr. asked me one time. I called into his radio show. He's the founder of Destiny Image Publishers.
Yeah, he passed away recently, dude.
Yeah.
Yeah, my dad. He was a good friend of my dad's.
Okay. And so long story made short, I listened to his Blog Talk Radio show a few times, and me and my friend Dave, we called in the same episode. And what I asked him was, how do you know when you're ready? Like, I know I'm a writer. I love writing and stuff. So like, how do you know when you're ready to write a book? Because a book is longer than a blog post or a series of blogs.
It's definitely a commitment, because once you're like, I'm going to do this, then it's like the rest of the universe conspires to ask you, are you really?
Yeah. Oh yeah. So I'd known for years I'm going to write books, but it's like, how will I know when I'm at that point? You watch the first Star Wars prequel and this little kid is going to become Darth Vader someday. Right. You know what I mean? And so it's like, you're getting to the point. I was like, when's that going to happen? When are we going to, bridge the result with where we're at now? And I felt that kind of thing where it's like, I know I'm going to write books, but how do I know when I'm ready? I had a mentor that said, don't write anything until you're 40.
Yeah.
And then other people are like, well, if you have a message, then it's no big deal. And he said, if you had a room with 5,000 people and you had 1 hour to talk to them, then what would you do? What would you give them? And I said to him something about the Holy Spirit or whatever. And he goes, well, there you go. That's your book. I was like, okay. And, less than a year before that, and you know who Dr. Michael Brown is. Yeah. He was down in Peru. The ministry as a part of had him down for like a conference. And we were having lunch somewhere. And I just asked him if I could ask him a question about, writing. And I go, how did you know when you were ready to write your first book? because he was 33 or something when he first published a book, and I was 30 or whatever when I was asking him this. So I was getting close to somebody I know who's a prolific writer, how old he was when he first started this. And he basically said, you feel like it's going to burst out of you. You know, you can't not write it. You can't not do it. You feel like it's just going to burst out of you, and you got to make the time for it.
Right.
And, you know, and so those pieces of advice, you know, in the same year or so, they kind of helped me hone in on like, okay, I know the general areas where I'm going to need to sit down and write about, in my case. And, you know, I learned a thing or two over the years about branding and about, you know, zeroing in on something so it's marketable and whatever. And you can answer the question, you know, what's in it for me, the reader has. So that's kind of how I figured out some things for myself, and what and what do I like writing about already that I'm putting out on the internet? What am I already passionate about? What would people expect that, like, if Steve Bremner is going to write a book, then like, what's it going to be about, or what forms it going to take on? And so I would just kind of suggest to people watching or listening to this that it's the same type of thing. Like, what's the thing that you're maybe an expert about, or what's the thing that you're, if maybe you're called, you know, you feel like you're supposed to write fiction.
Sure.
Like, what kind of story is brewing in you that, like, you know, with the right guidance, you could sit down and formulate. But particularly with nonfiction, it's usually like, what's the message that you can't shut up about? What can't you like, what's ready to burst out of you? If you only had an hour to talk to people for, you know, 5,000 people for 1 hour, what would you spend that hour talking about? You know, and those are the things you'll be able to determine.
I like to ask people too to think about, like, if you could go back in time 10 years and give yourself advice, what would you say? And write about that. And that's the thing, it doesn't even take very long. I mean, I love asking that question on my social media and just polling my audience and stuff, because you always get the most interesting statements. And a lot of times, you know, you'll get like these really long, multiple paragraph things where it's like, here's all these lessons that I wish I had known before just 10 years ago. And then every now and then you'll get these kind of random statements that inspire a whole lot of curiosity. It's like, you know, don't buy that 1974, you know, Ford, or what, you know, just these things. It's like, what's the story behind that? You know what I mean? And I feel like that's another guidepost for me. It's like, whenever I'm doing a lot of my writing, it's like, I tell a lot of authors, and you hear a lot of, you know, prolific writers say this too. It's like, whenever you're sitting down to write, try to think of just one person in your head that you're writing a letter to, or, you know, even if that person is you from 10 years ago, or maybe that's the person you want to be in the future, or whatever. It's like, don't try to write for a crowd, just write for one person, because that's the engagement. That's the way that people are going to consume your content. They're not going to be sitting there reading it unless you're at like some big book reading or something. It's going to be one-on-one, you with that reader. And so that for me, I feel has been a huge help for me, just as a writer in general.
I think it's a huge help, not just because like that's how I do it, but I've hopped on, you know, dozens of calls with authors who potentially want to work with me or have me coach them in their book and stuff. And I'll ask that question, like, if you could tell me one specific person this book is for, like, you know, who would that be, or who's your ideal avatar, you know? And I've noticed quite often, most people have never thought of it that way.
Right.
You know, they have like this broad Super Bowl ad kind of idea in mind of how it's
almost
for
like
everybody.
the shotgun approach. It's like, no, you need to like really hone in on this thing.
Yeah. And so then if you think about that before you've even started writing the book, then that helps inform how you're going to write the book and who it's for. And in the end, your content, your message will be even sharper because you've got that clarity of who you want to write it for. So, that helps a big deal for me too. Like, okay, so when I think of some of the things I'm writing or a blog post or a pod, in general, who do I say my podcast is for?
Hmm.
I had a guy I interviewed recently, sometime in the last several months, and he asked me, "So who's your audience?" And I was like, "Well, some what we call duns, the deconstructionists, people who are they might have been pastors, they might have been leaders, or they might still be, but they're really outside of the box. They're done with church as usual. These kind of people. How do I know that? Because that's the kind of people who contact me, or that's um, if you want to say, the feedback I get is always along those lines. So
Right.
that could represent a fraction of the people who are listening.
Right.
But if I'm going to go by the percentage of people being like a sampling of the whole, then those are the people who take a moment to like let me know, hey,
Yeah,
you
it's
know
the
what?
people who are really resonating at like a high frequency with the content that you're putting out. They're the ones who are going to go out of the way to sit and listen to something for an hour or 2 hours, or take the time in our hyper connected, super distracted world to
Right.
stop scrolling and stop channel. I mean, I feel like with the way we are on our social media nowadays, it's just the 21st century equivalent of channel flipping. I mean, I
Uh-huh.
know when I was a kid, it's like, we'd be, uh, it'd be late at night and the TV would be on, and like my parents would just be like, do, 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 just changing the channel, watch it for like 15 seconds, change it, not good enough. That's just changed to a swiping motion on your phone these days.
Uh-huh.
But the people who are going to slow down long enough and stop and say, you know what, I'm really willing to sit here and listen or engage with or read whatever it is that this person has to say. I'm always trying to keep those people in mind when I'm creating content. Even if there's, 3 people watching, or 30 or 300 or 3,000, it doesn't matter, because it's those individuals, and connecting with them in that moment wherever they're at. That's why I do this stuff. and
Right.
and I know that, for just as
Well,
long as I've known it's very similar for you as well.
yeah, and just to finish that thought, so I,
Sure.
so I don't leave it hanging. So when talking about like the avatar or the listener, the audience that's gravitating towards that, I can tell you now, when I started blogging or when I started podcasting or when I first wrote a Kindle book, I didn't think to myself, this book is for somebody who is just sick of church or something. But it's like it gradually became stuff like that, as one of my avatars, because those are the people that I'm, finding out my stuff is resonating with. I can't remember who I had in mind in particular when I started, but like when I first started my blog, for example, I was 23. It was just a simple blog spot. And the very first blog post was a copy and paste of an email I wrote everybody after my mom got healed of fibromyalgia at an event, a charismatic church outside of town. And so I started kind of like writing and defending about like divine healing and stuff like this.
Sure.
And of course, I got kind of like, I don't want to only write about that. And then over time, it's like, my website, for all intents and purposes, is the same blog as I started, but it's kind of just all around writing and content creation and getting your message out, and sharing what you know with the world. And so some of my posts are about mentoring and discipling, and some of my posts are about like writing and audiobooks and things like this. And I know there's schools of thought about having a niche, and there's other schools of thought about having a worldview. And I'm kind of more of like the worldview person,
Sure.
and have a few different topics. But in general, almost nothing that I'm writing about right now today is like the same as what I started off with or
Right.
started out with. And I saw some really bad advice in a writing group I'm in yesterday, and the person said, if you're going to start a new blog, the first post needs to be like basically introducing the topic that you're going to be writing for the rest of your life. Like, no,
Right.
just get the ball rolling. Just start, just
Yeah,
go,
just start.
just get momentum going. And a car is easier to turn and steer if it's moving, and you can worry later if you want to change your focus.
Right.
You don't
It's a
have
lot
to, you
easier.
don't have to
Yeah,
know
it's a
from the
lot
beginning.
easier to steer a moving vehicle than it is to just sit in the garage and ponder, like, where are we going to go today? It's like, well,
Right.
it's get started and you'll figure it out as you go. And I know that a lot of people really, really struggle with that, because we're so conditioned to feel like we have to have it all figured out. Here's newsflash: none of us have it figured out. Like, nobody. I mean, we all have different bits and pieces of this journey that we call life, and being willing to share that and connect with other people and build along the way. There's so many rewards that come along with that, and there's so much great connection that can happen if you're willing to put in the work and put in the time to do so. So,
Right.
very
Yeah.
cool. Okay, well, awesome. So we've got about 19, 20 minutes left here. So if anybody who's watching has any questions, feel free to drop them in there and we'll do our best to get to them. And if you're watching the replay of this or listening to it on the podcast, and you have any questions about anything we've talked about so far, feel free to send either Steve or I a message. Steve, people can get to you at stevebremner.com, obviously.
Yes. I have methods on that website for communicating with me, all my social media, an email form,
Great, and we'll do like a kind of call to action thing at the end of the show here too. But got a couple more questions for you regarding just some of the practical aspects of this stuff. How do you overcome the struggles that we all face as creators and entrepreneurs? And so, in my case, that's things like procrastination, dealing with disappointment, dealing with rejection, because whenever you're doing your own thing, inevitably you're out there having to sell your services. You're out there having to find people who not only can afford what you're bringing to the table, but understand the value of it and the inevitable ups and downs of dealing with any creative project. I mean, people,
Sure.
So what are some of the tactics that you have adopted over the years for getting through that stuff?
So
And it might not even be necessarily tactics as much as mindset
Sure.
and things like that. So,
I'll answer the question with mindset.
okay.
I'll take it that way first. And something that's working for me is, and you read a lot of Tim Ferriss and these guys and stuff, is I've only started doing this in the last few months. Is really, I used to be a night person, and I'm making a concerted effort to be getting up in the morning because of some stuff I've been learning about how motivation works and how, we start off the day, we get up, have our breakfast, and then that first hour after you're awake is basically what you do with it sets the tone for the rest of your day.
Absolutely.
A former drug addict I was listening to was explaining this, so he does these mindfulness things. He does confessions and declarations and things for that first hour of his morning so that the rest of his day is more productive and fruitful and whatever. And, so I was listening to that, and I've ripped off some things from the Miracle Morning with all the things the guy says you do before 8 a.m. or, you take an hour and you have 10 minutes for this, 10 minutes for that and stuff. And I kind of mix and match. I don't follow it exactly how he does it.
Sure.
But so this is where I'm getting at. The thing that hit me the most in all of this is that we all have a motivation tank. Maybe we start off the morning and that motivation tank is full and that willpower and whatnot. And so then you're using from it as the day goes on. And I used to say, I'm a night person. I get my best writing done at night.
Right.
But at the same time, I was starting to see in my life now as a father of two and a married guy, sometimes those hours when I used to be able to kind of work late at night, I'm tired now. I'm less focused, so I gave it a shot with getting up earlier and stuff. And, when we use that motivation, we take from that tank in the morning, we get a lot more done. And then when you've accomplished, your thing for the day or some kind of big task, the next thing on your plate feels easier and easier, so I'm finding, that sweet spot from 8 a.m. until 1 or something, on most weekdays. I really get the most productive of my work done. I work at home too, right? So right. So I'll be up before that, been going to the gym again earlier than that. So I try to be home and sitting in my office at 8, and then that's it. I got this good wave going. But if I try to do that at the end of the day, it doesn't work the same as I thought it did.
Well, because a lot of it too is, especially as the day goes on, if you're not really, really careful, Most people, as the day goes on, you're having to react more to other people's agendas as opposed to responding to the things that you know that you want to get done for your agenda.
Hmm.
And being able to be self-aware enough to know that is huge. So that's awesome, man. I mean, I've been doing the
Yeah.
same thing, trying to get up earlier because I've for years I would like do most of my website design and my coding and my design work like after 7 or 8 p.m. and sometimes I'd be up until like 4 in the morning, 5 in the morning, because I'd be able to get in that creative zone. But I've
Yeah.
gotten too busy, and the rest of the world doesn't operate on that schedule, so
Uh-huh.
it's just not feasible
Yeah.
anymore.
I used to tell people, and it was true, that the majority of the books I've written have been written between 10 p.m. and 2 a.m.
Yep.
you know? And now it's part of me feels like I wish I'd discovered this earlier with the whole, getting up 5:36 kind of thing. I feel weird saying that even now, just because of how many years and years of being a night person, I've had.
Sure.
And then, going to bed earlier with like my wife and daughters and stuff, going to bed near the same hour and stuff, but just getting up before everybody.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm loving it. And, I read out of my Bible, I read, some kind of mindset or business text as well. And, listen to, like, I got a Tony Robbins thing on my headphones,
Mm-hmm.
a priming thing. I don't know if you've heard it.
Yeah,
Somebody shared
he
it with
one of
me.
the things that I picked up from Tim Ferriss, he actually picked up from Tony Robbins that he writes at the top of all of his journals. He journals every morning. Is 3 words: state, story, strategy, and basically,
5 a.m. shutter. No.
yeah, Brent said 5 a.m. shutter.
See, but I've only gotten up at 5 a.m. like a few times. It's really like 6:30 at the latest that I'm.
Right.
So
Well, I started. I've been connecting more with some people in my area and looking into landing some government contracts with like some of the bigger agencies that need a lot of the kind of stuff that we do because they have the budget. And a lot of those networking meetings happen at 7 o'clock in the morning in Portland, which is an hour and a half away from me. So I'm having to to go to them. I have to get up at 4:30. Leave at 5 and drive for an hour and a half. So it's definitely a discipline, and it's not fun. Brent says, "Oh, that makes it okay then."
yeah, but seeing the results or having
That.
your goal, having your,
Yep.
it helps make it easier. And then once you've done it so many weeks, like 21 days or something, it starts to become difficult not to keep doing.
Right. You turn it
So it's
into a habit instead, and it's a subconscious thing. You kind of acclimate it to your subconscious instead of this thing that you have to condition yourself to do.
exactly
And
like that.
that's
That first time you do it, it sucks.
Oh
The
yeah,
first week or so.
first like 25 times you do it.
You're right.
But the state story strategy thing, I have that written in so many different journal entries on so many different whiteboards and things like that. And basically the concept is the state of mind that you're in will influence the story that you tell yourself, which will affect the strategy by which you tackle your problems. And so just those 3 words: state, story, strategy, so that I know when I first wake up in the morning, like if I'm not feeling great, if I'm tired and whatever, like I'll get a cup of coffee or some black tea or something like that, because I know it's going to prime my mental state with the little hit of caffeine. Or if it's not that, like I'll do some exercise or something, because instead of sitting down and immediately trying to tackle emails or client problems or whatever it is, I know that my most important thing has to be I have to get my mental and physical state primed before I can do that stuff most effectively. And so that has been, I mean, that's been a game changer for me. So that if I'm having a bad day or I'm not feeling so great, it's like this mental reminder. It's like, wait a second, what's the story I'm telling myself right now? Is it, the world's collapsing, everything's falling apart? It's like, okay, that's a bad state of mind to be in to try and solve your problems. And so that's been super, super helpful. Just that whole concept of priming. So that's cool to hear that you're doing the same thing, because I find that across the board, a lot of people have similar strategies.
Yeah.
So,
Well, I'm ripping off these strategies from other people who
Right.
are doing, amazing work, so it's like it makes sense to give these things a shot, you know?
Right. Absolutely. Very cool. Okay, so we've got about 10 minutes or so here. We kind of hit on your daily routine just in in that bit there. So I guess you would say ultimately it really just boils down to, in terms of overcoming the struggles, it's really about organizing your day so that you can win the day, and because it's all a series of, a series of moments, and you can always reset kind
Right.
of thing.
And just even scheduling things like, one of the things I talk to, my clients about is, scheduling the time to write or making time to write and not just waiting until you feel
Oh
inspired
yeah.
or waiting until the inspiration hits you. Because if you do that, then it's like it never comes, or it comes so rarely and is fleeting.
Yep.
And I like comparing it to going to the gym. So like 2 years ago, I weighed about 245 pounds, started going to the gym with my wife. She got pregnant and stopped eventually, and so I was going every day. And then once I started to get used to the burn, get used to the hurting and stuff, I always felt like I didn't really work out if I didn't spend like 2 hours there.
Right.
And then eventually it became impossible to really go 2 hours a day every day. This gym I got a membership at was open 6 days of the week. And I'm like gradually, no longer going every day, but just, the 3 times a week or whatever. And then I started to kind of stop feeling guilty, or I had some kind of change of mind where it's like, wait, I'm still seeing results. I'm still seeing change in my body and, these things. If I'm only going like 3 times, 4 times, and for like smaller doses,
Right.
and sometimes I feel like, I talk to people who they feel like they can't write their book because they don't have hours and hours and hours and hours and hours to do it.
Right.
Right. Rather than like, well, you can do it in increments. You can do it in small doses every day.
Yep.
And, if you just write 500 words a day, or if you just write 1,000 words a day, which is not a lot, it's like maybe the average person
Most
with their
people write
typing
more than that
skills.
on Facebook every day.
Yeah. Yeah. I've seen people who are like, I don't have time to write a book. I was like, funny, for your Facebook, it gives me the impression you got time for Netflix and
Yep.
Facebook and whatever, anyway, not going there for anyone's sake. But the idea, like, I can't do it unless I have this overabundance of time on my
Right.
hands. Like when I retire from this job, or when I have holidays or something, it's like, no, you could just, like in my case, it's like I just make like a half hour or an hour earlier a day to get up, and I'm getting more stuff done. I'm getting some of my word count in. But if somebody just writes like 1,000 words a day, maybe like that's an hour or less than an hour for the average
Yep.
typist. Then in a month you've written 30,000 words.
Yep.
You've
That's a book.
2 months you've written 60,000 words. And it's like most people, they have this idea like, I can't do that unless I can write all 30,000 words over the weekend, or
Yep.
some kind of thing like that. So for me, it's just taking daily action steps,
Yep.
taking something I can do daily, or multiple times a week. I'm not a hard, butt about every day, but just in general, that I'm, instead of waiting until I feel like I've got enough time, make time and do a little bit if that's necessary. And imperfect action is better than perfect action. Imperfect action is better than no action at all, right?
Yep.
Like you said, get started and figure it out as you go. Same thing, just start, just spit it out on your screen, and fix it later.
Right.
That's so it's just, I think that's one of the biggest mental barriers for me, is like this idea that I had to let go and forget and overcome, that I don't need to wait until I have all the time in the world, hours and hours and hours, even though I prefer that,
Sure.
like
I mean, we'd all prefer just giant blocks of uninterrupted time, but find me one person who can authentically say, "Oh yes, I have 6 hours of completely free time to do whatever I want every day of the week." It's like, you're a
this person doesn't
unicorn.
have
Congratulations.
kids.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And for just on to kind of piggyback on that, I taught myself how to play piano by making the decision I'm going to play for at least 10 minutes a day until I can sit down and play piano like without having to think about it. So I do not know how to read sheet music to this day. I never watched any videos on how to play piano. What I did was I had a keyboard that I got at a thrift store for like $30 that had the little light up keys. And it has a MIDI plug, so I could plug it into my phone or my iPad and, kind of mess around with GarageBand or whatever, which is free if you have an Apple device. And I would put music on that I liked. A lot of times I started with like pop music because it's very basic in terms of its music structure. And I would literally just listen to the music and then try to find the notes of the chord progression, and then I would just play along with that. And it took me a really long time, and I guarantee I could have probably done it faster if I had actually like watched videos on how to do this. But I wanted to teach myself how to hear the music and play by ear. I'd heard of people being able to do it. I'm like, that sounds amazing. I think that would be super cool to be able to do that. And so I just decided, I'm like, I'm going to spend 10 minutes a day. I'm going to get 1% better every day. And just, that was it. And now, a couple years later, I can put on pretty much any kind of music, whether it's country or classical or hip hop or whatever. And
polka.
Maybe not polka. I grew up in Pittsburgh, so polka is a big thing there. But I can sit down and listen and play an accompaniment piano track to pretty much any kind of music now. And I don't know how it works. It just eventually over time, your body and your brain and your subconscious picks it up. And same thing with writing and any kind of creative work. Like Steve said, guys, if you make the decision, I am going to make a priority and do this every day, it takes about 21 to 30 days to form a new habit. That's what so much of this is about, really, is getting it into your subconscious. And Steve, you recommended an excellent book on the subconscious to me. It's by Maxwell Maltz called Psycho-Cybernetics. So can you talk a little bit about that?
Oh yeah. So I basically read it before Christmas or before New Year's. A coaching program I was in. As soon as I signed up, that's something they send you in the mail to just help with your mindset. And it was written in 1960. The author was a plastic surgeon, and
I thought that
a
was
psychologist.
fascinating. I really did.
Yeah, and so that for some of you, you might have read it in college or whatever, because a lot of the self-help books and things like this are basically, all second generation from like having learned from psycho-cybernetics. And he basically shared he would do facial reconstruction for people who were born with some kind of deformity or if they were in an accident or something. And he had been basically documenting how people were, they could physically have their appearance changed, but it would take weeks for them to really start believing it and acting like it. And I think, there's a couple stories in there, but one of my favorites is the guy who, he came in saying, I need my nose, fixed. Because I feel like nobody's listening to me. Everybody's paying attention to my nose. He's like, there's nothing wrong with your nose. You just need some confidence or
right.
Whatever his exact advice was, because he was some kind of lecturer.
Right.
And so and this guy basically changed his mind. He believed the doctor or whatever. And he became this well sought after public lecturer or speaker, where his meetings would be booked like a year in advance.
Yep.
In advance. So it's like literally nothing changed in his appearance. The author refused to do any work on him because he said he didn't need it, and then he became a completely different person just literally from his mindset. So it's a really hefty read, but it's a worthwhile read. It's not over anybody's head. It's not a high academic level book, but it pioneered a lot of thought, I guess, in with regard to psycho-cybernetics or mental kind of stuff, mind over matter, well, not mind over matter, but you get the idea.
Sure. Well, how much your mind will affect the matter, how much the mind will affect your actions.
Yeah, and like there's a chapter later on in the book, and he talks about how our your brain doesn't know the difference with your memory, and your worries, the things you think about and you anticipate and believe will happen. Your brain basically charts like the same pathways as stuff you're imagining, versus stuff you remember having happened or
right.
So, I was listening to something else the other day that said worry is basically praying for stuff you don't want to happen. and your brain basically charts these same pathways. So he was talking about how, successful people, they take that knowledge and they do the opposite with it. They pump themselves up. They listen to these priming things. They put images on their desk in front of their wherever they're going to be all day, and visualize and remind themselves. And the guy who wrote 177 mental toughness secrets, he cut things out of magazines and glued them to this dartboard or whatever, and he has it in front of a treadmill that he runs on every morning.
Right.
And he and just like a simple thing like we did in school,
like the vision boards.
Yeah.
Yep.
And
I have
he's
one
like,
right behind. I mean, you can't see it because this is a green screen right now, but I have one in my closet.
Yeah. And so like these people do those kinds of things to pump themselves up and focus and encourage themselves and try to wire their mental pathways so that they're going for these things and not worrying. I mean, I think everyone watching this can think of somebody in their life who was just a worry wart. Well, like the idea of doing the opposite of that and going for it. And so that I've got declarations and confessions I read, almost every morning. Sometimes I don't, or I leave them out. And I just, things that I want to do and want to get better at, or I'm committed to doing in my life, whatever. I just make sure to be saying it, because there's just something about you're aligning yourself and giving yourself this goal. You're doing something to yourself so that you'll attempt to fulfill that.
Right.
It's not like there's power inherent in the words themselves or something.
No, but the power, as far as I understand it and have experienced it, it's the power is the intention and the imagination and the energy that you put into it. Because if you don't believe that you can do something, you're not going to attempt it. And so much of our behavior and our beliefs largely are just an amalgamation of things that have been handed to us over the years. And it's not until you start figuring out, like life largely is what we make of it. Life largely is what we put into it, and the relationships we form and the people we choose to surround ourselves with, the information we choose to consume, and especially nowadays, like it used to be our parents' generation, especially with like television. What was it? 2 or 3 channels on TV? A couple of channels on the radio.
Not many.
Nowadays, it's literally infinite. Like I think every 10 minutes there's, or every minute there's like 400 hours of video uploaded to YouTube or something insane. Like this is 2018 and that's happening. Like can you imagine just, not that far from now what that's going to look like? Brent said, I've even heard of falling asleep to self-affirmation talk so that as you're drifting off, it sort of inserts itself into your subconscious. Yeah. I mean, and that's the thing. Literally, what do you have to lose? Like, I'm not real big on the whole, like, name it, claim it, all this, quote unquote prosperity gospel stuff. But when it comes to creating the life that you want to create, why not look at people who are doing what you want to be doing and find out what they're doing and then just try doing it? Like you literally have nothing to lose except the stuff in your life that you're not happy about right now.
Yeah.
So
yeah, and so I would find there's all sorts of people doing confessions and visualization, things like that, where there's speaking involved, saying, some people, it's mantras, other people like,
sure.
Me, it's a lot more, closer to prayer, things like this, but and so it's like, if the successful people are doing these things, then it's like, okay, why not give it a shot too, if I want to be successful?
Right.
And so, what the Miracle Morning and Miracle Morning for Writers, if you only have time to read like one of those books, then I would get the whatever one is like your profession, because he's got them for sales.
Who wrote that?
Hal Elrod.
Okay.
He wrote the first one. And so I read that one, and then I read the one for writers, and he's got like a series of them he co-writes with different people in those fields. And if you go to Amazon and you read 1-star reviews, you see oftentimes what they complain about is it's just kind of like a repackaging of the original Miracle Morning. So if people watching this, they don't need to go get like every one of his books or something. But if you want to go grab the one that's like for your field,
Sure.
I'm sure you'll get a lot out of it. Because some of it was basic and I already knew, but stuff in the Miracle Morning for Writers was very, very useful to me. It helped reinforce that I'm gonna become a morning person from now on. With exceptions to like maybe something going on in life where I can't or shouldn't,
Sure.
but otherwise I'm just seeing how much it's changing me, seeing how much more content I'm putting out into my, I use Scrivener for things I'm writing.
Oh yeah,
And I'm
I do
just
too.
seeing how much more I'm getting accomplished
That's
in
a
the
software for those of you who don't know.
right.
Scrivener.
And
We'll
it's my
put links in
favorite
the show
software
notes.
yeah. And it's definitely my favorite software for long projects. So yeah.
Very cool, man. Well, I think that's pretty much all I had for today, and we've gone a little bit over our time, so we'll probably start wrapping it up here.
Sure.
So thank you so much for your time and your advice on this stuff today. I mean, it's always nice connecting with other people who are on similar pathways and hearing what it is that kind of makes them tick and why they're doing what they're doing. And so, you and I have been talking recently about putting together some packages for authors who need some help making their books a reality. And so, can you talk about a little bit, how people can connect with you and kind of get that ball rolling? I would be helping out more on the side of doing like the cover design and some of the coaching and consulting and those kinds of things. But Steve is really great at helping authors actually walk through the process of really finishing writing their book and those kinds of things. So can you talk a little bit about that and how people can get in touch with you to get that started?
Yeah. So I'll start with how to get in touch. We'll post a link to just the booking calendar, or if you go to stevebremner.com, it's not hard to find, how to contact me or how to book a call with me or whatever. And what we'll do if you take me up on that is if you have a book that you want to write, or you've started to write and you're stuck, or you've written a manuscript, or whatever stage of the writing process you're in, and you want to do this, we've been stoking the flames, then book a call with us, and from there we'll talk. We'll find out what you need help with if you want our help. Like Ryan said, he's the visual aspect of it all, but if you need help, like a coach, somebody who's going to hold you accountable to your own goal and give you a weekly or daily, whatever, steps for how to get your book written, and I go through it with people I'm working with, so I on a daily or weekly basis, we're hopping on a couple calls, or we're in, things like Zoom, like we're doing here. And I basically will help you make your book worth putting out, and so we've got Ryan, and I've got an editor, and then there's myself, and I really help with, your launch strategy, helping you figure out how you're going to get a lot of people to read it. And our big thing is, you're going to compete with professional books, that you don't go and do your own cover on GIMP or something, and that your book, you need another set of eyes. Somebody like me, I've done both. I've been self-published and published, so I know the different things that work in a book, how to help you hone in on your avatar, things we talked about in this conversation. But I've got a guy, I'm ghostwriting a book for him, and I've got a system in place for that. I've got another person I'm coaching, and another person who, they came to me and they've got a book they've been, working on and haven't touched for a year, and basically came to me to basically help them fix that, and turn it into a manuscript that can, be read at a popular level, and so it just depends on where you're at in this stage. Or if you're done, you've written a book and now you just don't know what to do next, then Ryan and I are people to reach out to help you with that, and we'll put you on a good path. So Anything I left out that you think is worth bringing up?
No, I think that pretty much wraps it up. So again, guys, go to stevebremner.com and stay tuned. We are going to be rolling out some more details of this, and we're probably going to put together like a landing page that's really specific to some different packages that we can offer. And things of that sort that kind of go into more details, but some of that stuff is still in development right now, so just stay tuned on that. But in the meantime, if you're an author or an aspiring author who wants to get your book into the marketplace and be able to print it out and hold it and take it to marketing events or things that you're going to, and being able to position yourself as an expert in your industry, definitely get in touch with us and we will see about making that happen for you. Because just a quick story, a quick testimonial on that. My first book, I went to a networking event, and a lot of times whenever you go to these events and you're meeting new people and trying to find clients and stuff, you end up standing up and introducing yourself and saying, "Hi, I'm so-and-so, this is what I do." I went to this event and I stood up and I said, "Hi, I'm Ryan. I run a design agency, and I also am an author." And so I held up my book and said, "This is the first book that I wrote." And almost immediately after the event was over, somebody came over to me and said, "I have a client that I want to introduce you to." And she came over because she saw that I had the book. And she said, "My client is, working on this big project, and I think that you're the right person to talk to." That conversation ended up leading to me landing a very, very sizable no, is it five? Yes, it ended up me landing a 5-figure contract. And so there's a lot of things that happen whenever you're able to not just have a business card that you make for yourself. Brent said those kinds of events make me want to stab myself in the eye. Yeah, it's something that you can practice. But ultimately, guys, a lot of this is about what kind of value are you bringing to the world, and being willing to put it in something that people can hold in their hands. And a book is an excellent way to do that. Never before in human history have you been able to do that without having to jump through a zillion different hoops and those kinds of things. So a lot of the gatekeepers of yesterday just aren't there anymore. So,
And not even that, but Amazon is like the number 3 website in like all the internet.
yep.
If you're positioned there, you're more discoverable than just Google and your website and these things, so somebody could go to Amazon. They're already looking for the topic you might be the expert about, you might be the one writing about. And if you do it right and you market it right and you listen to me and do what I say, you could be the number 1 result on Amazon. Yep. Even if you're not well known yet, and just be introduced to all sorts of people looking for what you have to offer. Right. So
absolutely, it's really just about creating a container for people to find the stuff that you're trying to bring out into the world, and being able to build the systems and set those systems up in place, whether that's a website, an email list, your social media, all of that stuff. All of these things, you can create them in a way where they work for you, instead of being just this thing that you're kind of flying by the seat of your pants. So that's about all we got for today, guys. Just a couple quick things. On the note about books, my latest book is called The Science of Getting Rich, and that is how to think, how to act, and what to do to harness your creative potential. You can get your copy of that today at scienceofgettingrich.info. It's all about making ideas happen and monetizing your own ideas. And I am wrapping up the launch special price of $15 at the site at the end of this month. So if you want that at the $15 price, definitely pick that up soon. And also, if you have a business idea, or you're a nonprofit, or maybe you already have a business or a nonprofit and you're wanting to update your branding, maybe you've outgrown it and it's time to really take things to the next level, go to logos.reformdesigns.biz today and look at our branding packages and connect with me and my team, and we will help you update your branding and make it something that you're really happy to put on clothing and your business cards and your website and all of that stuff. Because if you have a logo that you're not happy with, the biggest question that I have for you is, what are you waiting for? because that shame that you carry about your logo and your ideas and your business or whatever, people pick up on that whenever you're in conversation with them. How many times have you been in an event or something where someone hands you a business card and they're like, oh, my website, don't make fun of me for it, it's so bad or whatever. All of that stuff does not serve you. So look at this stuff like it's an investment in the future of your business. And if you're interested in getting our help with that, just go to logos.reformdesigns.biz and we'll hook you up. So that's about all we have for today. Connect with Steve at stevebremner.com. Steve, as always, thank you for connecting and being on the show today.
Yeah, thank you for having me. Everything in my life has been building to this moment today. And it's just all going to go downhill now from here. Now that I've reached this summit, I'm just joking with you. I'm glad to have been able to do this with you too.
Awesome. Well, hang on, Steve. We can wrap up after we're off the air here. I'm just going to wrap up. So, thanks everybody. I'm Ryan Rhoades, the creative director and founder at Reformation Designs. You can connect with us at reformdesigns.biz. If you have any questions or if you know anybody who you think should be on the show, just reach out. I'm likely going to be taking next week off because this is actually the wrap-up episode of our branding series, because we have now gotten to branding 110. And so for those of you who don't know, I'm going to be putting all of these on my podcast, which is called the Creative Revolution Podcast. It's all about making ideas happen in the 21st century. And so over the next several weeks, I'm going to be uploading the audio of these to that podcast, but any future interviews, that's the branding that I'm going to be going with, because it's kind of a nice encapsulation of all the stuff I like to talk about. So this wraps up our branding series, because if you've created a business or an idea and you've positioned yourself as an expert, then putting a book out into the world is a nice capstone on that. So I thought it'd be a good way to wrap that up. So that's all we have for this episode. Stay tuned for what we have coming down the pipe. And again, contact Steve at stevebremner.com if you're interested in making your book happen. Talk to you next time. Cheers.